Okay, so the qualifying procedure for British Open Nationals has changed. And if you follow me on Instagram, you'll know that I have been putting up boxes on my Instagram story today, asking people's opinion, and I have had so many discussions with so many different people, lifters of all different levels, experiences, everything. And I've got some really interesting kind of talking points on it, so I thought I would put them into a video. So there's been quite a big change announced, and when I say announced, it hasn't actually been announced, which has caused a lot of confusion. So the qualifying trials 2025 have been put on the British Powerlifting website, as they usually would be around this time of year for the following year. And there are, if you know where to look on the website, some board kind of meeting minutes and some kind of posts about the changes to the qualifying procedure for the open class. However, they're not the easiest to find for people that are possibly newer to the sport, don't really know how to navigate the website and that sort of thing, which I think is where the confusion has come from. And what they did put out wasn't necessarily worded the most clearly. But British Powerlifting on their Instagram have been kind of answering some questions today. I've had discussions with tons of different people, and by just applying a bit of common sense, I think everyone's kind of a bit clearer on what the qualifying procedure is now. So, first things first, what is the new qualifying procedure for the Open British Championships? I've written everything out on my phone because I know otherwise I'll just go off on a tangent. So each weight class is now capped at 14 lifters. So that is the largest flight you are allowed in a British powerlifting like IPF comp. So each weight class is capped at 14 lifters. To get a place, this is where people were starting to get confused, you need to either place top 3 at the year prior's British Championships. So if you place top 3 at this year's British Championships, you will have a place at the 2026 British Championships. Or if that's not possible for you, if you don't qualify that way, you can win your home nation championships. So that would be either the English, Scottish, Welsh, Northern Irish national comp that they host every year. If, again, none of those apply, you can win the new competitions that they are hosting, which I think is also where a lot of confusion came from because no one really knew what they were talking about with this. So they're going to start hosting an annual Northern and Southern qualifier, essentially. And the winner of each of those, so the Northern or Southern Championships, will also get a place at the British for that year. So, remaining spaces then will be given based on the highest ranking applicants. So this is also where confusion has come in, because originally it read as if those places were going to be given out based on good lift score within those weight classes. And that's where a lot of people started to disagree with this, because they were like, well, if it's a weight class sport, if you're competing in a weight class and it's not a good lift competition, which Nationals is not a good lift competition, it is a weight class competition, then really they should be given out on total rather than good lift points. Now, I think this is not confirmed, but the British Powerlifting Instagram page has confirmed it, so I'd like to think it's accurate. Apparently, these spaces, I can't get my words out, are going to be given out based off of total, but where the good lift comes in is you need to hit a minimum good lift points to be able to get a place at the British Championships. So the minimum good lift points has not yet been confirmed. It is speculated that it will be roughly 80 good lift points. 79 to 80 is what the British Powerlifting page has said today, but that is just a ballpark figure of roughly where they think it will be. So essentially, rather than having a minimum qualifying total for these 14 people, because some weight classes aren't full, some won't have 14 people, obviously in the coming years at the rate of growth of this sport, it probably will be a case that 14 people isn't that much for a lot of the classes, or for any of the classes. But at this present moment in time, a lot of weight classes probably still won't get 14 people competing in them. Basically, the minimum good lift points just stops people that probably wouldn't have even qualified for nationals beforehand being able to qualify still. It just keeps it a bit more competitive. So that is how you qualify for the British, which I think is somewhat simple. It makes sense when you sit and think about it, but I think a lot of newer lifters were a bit confused by this, or people that maybe didn't take the time to kind of read it properly. So yeah, essentially it's just a more exclusive and I guess competitive way to get to the British, rather than just going to a regional, hitting the minimum qualifying total and then just turning up at nationals and really trying. You now have to kind of earn your place in a more competitive way for the most part. This isn't going to affect every single weight class in the same way, which is one of the discussion points that has come up today. So certain weight classes are obviously more popular. The first ones that spring to mind, you've got the 83 men, 93 men, you've got the 76 women, the 69 women, and there's others as well that are very much, I say overpopulated. They are just very popular weight classes. They are quite a natural weight for people to sit, and they are very busy classes that typically have 2, maybe 3 flights at a national level comp alone. So rather than massively boosting qualifying totals, which would still make the classes overpopulated for the most part, they have added in this system where you have 14 lifters maximum per class, which I personally think is a really good idea. And I think 14 is enough spaces that it keeps it somewhat accessible. Obviously, it's depending on weight class though. I'm speaking as an 84, and at the last 2 British comps, I'm pretty sure the 84s had maybe 6 to 8 lifters. So this rule doesn't really affect me too much. And I don't want to say speaking from a place of privilege because I've worked to get to where I am, but I've never struggled to qualify for nationals, which is why I wanted to speak to people from different levels, from different backgrounds, to get honest opinions across the board, rather than me sitting here and saying, I love this change, because I do like this change, but also, I mean, I'm probably going to jinx it now and not qualify ever again for the British. I probably won't struggle that much to make the British, at least for the next year. Who knows after that who's going to come into the sport and how competitive it's going to get. But that's kind of why I wanted to speak to so many different people to get opinions to make this video. So, the qualifying procedure I've explained. Let's get into some of the pros and cons and queries that people have sent in. Okay, so positives first. It creates more of a spectacle for the British Championships. So this is something that I actually said, but a lot of people have agreed and also made very similar points. I love powerlifting. I am a powerlifting fan. I like to watch nationals. I like to watch internationals. I like to watch regionals if I know people competing. I am a fan of the sport. But I would be lying if I sat here and said that when it comes to the British or any other national level comp, even Worlds, I don't really watch the B group. Unless I know people in the B group, then I will watch it. Or if there's quite big names in the B group, I will then watch it. It's more of an international perspective. But especially when it comes to the British, I don't really tune in for the B group. And as a massive fan of the sport, if I'm saying that, I know I'm not alone. And a lot of other people have said similar things to me today as well. Where really, from a viewer perspective, if you have got a weight class battle, you've got the top 14 lifters in each weight class competing against each other at a time, you've just got one flight, each weight class, you're going to tune in more. It's going to be more entertaining to watch. It's going to be easier to follow as well, just having that one flight of lifters. So I think as a whole, it will bring more eyes to that level of comp. No, there won't be as many people competing, which might mean that in-person spectators go down a little bit. But that's also not potentially the case either. It's going to be something that we have to kind of see. But the higher level we get at the British, the more people will probably want to also travel to watch as well, rather than sitting through an entire day of lifting with people that they probably aren't that interested in watching, which sounds quite harsh. But it is the sad reality. Like, powerlifting isn't that entertaining for the majority of people to watch. So yeah, making each weight class more of a spectacle, I think, can only be a good thing. It makes the nationals more prestigious. Being able to say that you have earned your spot to get to the British, you're gonna go, right? If you've qualified, if you've, pushed to make top 3 at the British to qualify, of course you're gonna want to go the next year. Like, it's more of an exclusive spot. Like, you've really earned that spot. Not that qualifying totals mean you haven't, but it's a smaller pool of people that have made the cut. So to make that cut is even more of an achievement than it was before. And I know I've had one lifter say to me that they weren't even going to do the British this year because they didn't particularly enjoy it last year. It didn't feel that competitive. It wasn't that much fun, and it just didn't feel worth it. Like, they've enjoyed other competitions more. But now that they know that it's that much more exclusive, they are pushing for a podium spot this year to get them to next year's British. And that already shows it's making it more of an achievement, like even more of an achievement to go. I don't want to downplay the achievement, because a lot of people, and I'll get to this point, a lot of people's main goal in powerlifting is just to qualify for nationals. I say just, is to qualify for nationals and compete on that national stage. And that is a massive achievement in itself for a lot of people as well. But that's something we'll talk about later. Anyway, positives at the moment, not negatives. It makes hosting nationals easier, and they will probably run over less days, which has other pros to it as well. So not only will it be easier to host because you'll know how many lifters to expect. I say invites, it probably won't be like actual invites, but Places will be confirmed probably further in advance. You'll know how many lifters to expect. There's a cap for how many lifters can do it. And if they can condense the days down, it might be that they split men and women apart. It might be that they can do it all in one weekend. But a lot of lifters can't get the time off work to compete during the week like they currently would have to compete at the British. So by condensing it down to the weekend, you're probably also going to get more people that are able to do it that would miss out on the British otherwise. Like, say, teachers, for example. A lot of teachers, I know a lot of teachers that lift, and they have to be so selective about what comps they do because they can't, like national-wise, because they can't compete on weekdays. And they won't enter a comp until they're pretty certain that they'll be able to, because they also won't get a refund once the schedule's then released. So, slight rant. It will be more inclusive to people that maybe couldn't get the time off work during the week. And obviously some people can't get time off at weekends, so that's a different point. You can't please everyone. But yeah, I think it will make hosting them easier. As someone that has hosted one single comp, it is very stressful. And I knew how many people were doing mine. I think people always say that national level comps need to feel like a national level comp. They need to feel more like a spectacle. And this, I personally think, and other people have said it as well, is a massive step in the right direction for that. Because the hosts will be able to put more time into the comp, and they'll have more answers in advance of how many lifters, things like that, that it will then make hosting it easier for them, which will then make it in turn a better competition. Another really positive point that I completely agree with that was made was it is a significant boost in the standard of the biggest comp in the British powerlifting calendar. So by making this an event so much more exclusive, it will also then probably have a trickle-down effect on the smaller comps. So, for example, I won the English like 5 weeks ago. I don't even feel proud of that achievement because in my head it's not that big of a comp, and I think because of the fact that what didn't feel that prestigious when I was there might be part of why I feel like that. And I'm very aware that that is a very weird and bad mentality to have, but I know I'm not alone in that. Comps like the English aren't really ranked and seen as that prestigious at the moment. If you make that one of the only chances in the year to qualify for the British in that exclusive way that they're doing it, more people are going to see the English as prestigious. It's going to make the lesser comps better. It's also going to raise the standard that comp hosts have to have for these competitions, because if these qualifying competitions aren't run to a high standard and you're then taking away the chance to compete at the British, which was the highest level, people aren't going to be very happy. So yeah, I think by adding in this level of qualifying competitions and less chances to win and qualify for the British, it's going to make these smaller comps bigger. So this is a point actually kind of crossing over to one of the sort of negative points. A lot of people's dream is to qualify for the British, okay? And my instant thought with this was it is sad for those people that they now possibly, I don't want to say someone will never reach that level, because if you don't try, then you won't make it. And I think a lot of people have the mindset that for them, the British is the highest they're ever going to achieve. But actually, if they kind of change the way they were thinking about it, that might not be the case. But that is a point for a separate conversation. Basically, what I wanted to say was, these people that were, dreaming of qualifying for the British, well, if they change their sights to qualifying for the English, qualifying for the Welsh, the Northern Irish comp, the Scottish comp, it's gonna make, those competitions are going to be more prestigious by default because the British is so much harder to get into. It's just gonna happen. It's gonna have a trickle-down effect, and I think that's a very, very important point. Another positive that not many people actually brought up that I thought was a really good point was this is gonna push the standard of coaching and game day handling up in the UK. So if you only have a limited number of competitions to qualify for, and at the majority of them you have to win, so if you're doing your home nations competition, or if you're doing the Northern or Southern qualifier, the only way to get your British place is to win, game day handling is going to be more important than ever. Obviously, coaching up to that point, prep and all of that is still going to be more incredibly important, but game day handling is also going to be really important. It's going to make that side of things, I think, one, more fun to watch, but also it's going to feel more like a sport when you're in that environment, which I think is a good thing. And the person that pointed that out to me, I hadn't even considered that side of it at that point, but I think that's another positive. Could possibly be seen as a negative, because I think for some people it might take the fun out of it, but then at the same time, if you want to compete at a high level, you have to see it as a sport, Like, obviously it's still meant to be fun. We're not getting paid to powerlift for the most part, but it's making it more of a competitive sport, which again is a move in the right direction, at least in my opinion and a couple of other people that I've spoken to about it. So let's move on to the negatives. There were a lot of negatives, I'm not gonna lie, but the majority of people did preface it by saying they do think it's probably overall a good move. So there wasn't that much negativity, but obviously people love to moan, and the reasons said were pretty reasonable. Like, no one gave an answer or an opinion that was completely unreasonable. A few people said they felt like it was a bit elitist and that side of things, but I think the counter argument to that is nationals is supposed to be hard to get to, and for some people it's harder than others, and that is just a fact of sport, you know. But nationals is supposed to be elitist. It's supposed to be hard to get to. It's supposed to feel like an achievement qualifying for nationals, and to a lot of people it already does, but by pushing that entry level up and making it even more exclusive, it's just going to push that even more, and it's going to drive people to try harder and be more competitive. Like, I might get hate for saying this, but I think anyone can qualify for nationals with time and work, and it's like, it's going to just drive people to push that bit harder, you know? If you're not necessarily doing everything in your power that you possibly could and you really want to get there, there is still a chance that you can, and I think writing yourself off now that these standards have changed is not going to do any favours in terms of your progress. But I do also think driving to now aim for those qualifying comps first is also a massive step forward, because it's going to, like I mentioned, it's going to have a trickle-down effect. It's going to. But anyway, I'm going off track. So, a lot of people said it was a bit elitist, and again, it's just because it's a more exclusive competition, but nationals is supposed to be difficult to get to. In other sports, it's not easy to compete at national level. People have been moaning about the good lift points over the qualifying, or over the total for the qualifying for those remaining spots, but I think that was just kind of a wording error. And from what I've seen from British Powerlifting's Instagram, which I would like to think is correct, as I mentioned earlier, it probably will be total for the remaining spots, but you just have to hit the minimum good lift points to get those remaining spots. But if it does turn out that the remaining spots are given on good lift points, I do think that's a bit silly. But I do also think there's not going to be that much difference in the totals, unless someone like literally weighs 76.1 in the 84 class, for example. But yeah, I think as long as it's done on total, I think people will be less annoyed. That was the only thing I wasn't a fan of when I first read it, that it was going to be on good lift points for those remaining spots. But again, I think that was just a miswording kind of thing. I think it is actually going to be done on total. Quite a lot of people have made the point that this takes away anything for mid-level lifters to aim for, which I understand that being like a knee-jerk reaction to this news, but I don't think that's a fair way to look at it, and I think with a bit of time people's perspectives will quickly shift, and they will still have things to aim for, because they can aim for the other qualifying competitions, and then you can set the goals of maybe you place 9th at this year's English, well next year you can aim to place 7th, and so on, and there are still goals to be had besides just qualifying for something. So I think that is a fair point. Completely, like, all of these points that have been made are completely fair, but I think it's just a perspective shift. I had this exact conversation with one of my lifters today, because he would really like to qualify for the British. There was a good chance he was going to be there for next year, but it's now been pushed back because he's also in quite a popular class. Well, that's fine. It just means that we're going to aim for placing higher at the English, etc. And then the goalpost just moved, but it's still there. And that's what I think people need to remember with this. Like, if you qualified for the British for this year, and now you're thinking you might not be able to qualify again next year or for however many years, it's going to do one or two things. It's going to completely demotivate you and you're not going to want to powerlift anymore, which is a fair reaction, but also, if you love training and if you love the sport, this is a hobby for most people at the end of the day, really you want to try and shift that perspective and see it as, okay, the goalpost just moved, but that's fine. I can still keep adding to my total and I will get back to the British at some point. Or even if you won't get back to the British, you can just aim to place higher and higher every year. It's a simple way to change the mindset. Obviously it's easier said than done, but that's just my opinion on that. Again, I am speaking from a place where I probably will still be able to qualify, and I'm very aware of that. And I don't want people to think that I'm making this video from like an elitist point, because I'm absolutely not. I see it from both perspectives. I have athletes on both sides of this, and I've spoken to a lot of them today about it, and it's just, the goalposts have moved, the qualifying procedure has changed. British Nationals is harder to get to, but the other comps are going to improve. They're going to have to at the end of the day. Anyway, I said I wasn't going to go on tangents, and I am. So someone also has said about the fact that other classes they won't be as popular, obviously. So perfect example is myself. The 76s are so popular, and there probably are 14 girls, 14 to 20, I don't know. There's a lot of girls that are going to be battling for places probably. So it probably won't be that easy to qualify as a 76. It'll probably be harder to qualify as a 76 than it will as an 84, you know. So is this just going to encourage people to move up to get to nationals? Probably, but that to me isn't a negative. It's just making a decision based on what their goals are. And a lot of people do hang on to weight classes for longer than they should anyway, so it might end up being a good thing in helping these athletes progress even more and reach new standards they didn't even know were possible for themselves. So basically, I think the negative point was that it's going to encourage people to manipulate their weight a little bit more or cut and bulk, similar to how, like, obviously very different scenarios, but how Sheffield has encouraged people to cut weight classes, etc. It might do that, but that's all part of the sport. It's not a part of the sport that I think should be massively encouraged, don't get me wrong, but when you're at top level, you need to think of these things, and for some people, British is seen as the top level, so that I think is kind of like I don't know. Someone else has also said that people will wait now and try and qualify as late as possible so they know what they need, which I think kind of is a fair point, and I get the logic behind that point. But I also think it will go the other way in that people will be desperate to qualify. As soon as you win one of these competitions, you're in. It's not a case of if you win the English but someone out-totals you at the Northerns or Southerns, they get your place. If you win, you are in. So I think actually it will probably encourage people to qualify earlier on. But it could go one of two ways. And everyone's going to be different on how they react to this as well. Again, common theme. To be honest, this is one of the most common themes, and it goes with the elitist point. It's pushing the goalpost back for people. It's probably going to make people not want to stick to the sport for as long. But that also, as I mentioned before, comes from what you're in the sport for in the first place. Like, I am competitive. If I didn't think I was ever going to get to a decent level in this sport, I would have packed it in and found something else that I was good at. And that is a completely honest answer. But a lot of powerlifters do it because they genuinely love training in the gym, they love lifting heavy, and they love seeing their own progress. And, you know, obviously I love that all as well, but it depends on why you're in the sport as to how this is going to affect you. But yeah, some people have basically said, unless you're crazy strong, you're not chasing a qualifying total anymore. You don't know where it's going to be in 10 years' time. It could, like, if you get into the sport late, essentially, that goalpost is unreachable for a lot of people. And someone said similar thing, newbie lifters find it really hard to find any motivation to stay in this federation unless they're crazy strong. So it's going to put people off sticking in the sport. And yeah, again, people think this is going to deter a lot of newbie lifters from the federation, especially open age category. The main negative has just been, I'm reading so many of these replies, and they are all very similar field of, it's going to put open lifters off sticking in the sport. If you come in at an open level, that goalpost for a lot of, if you've never been in the gym before and you come into powerlifting as an open lifter, whether you're 25, 30, whatever age you are, it probably will feel like an impossible feat making it to nationals now, because you don't have a qualifying total to aim for. And generally speaking, the bar is rising every single year. So it's probably just going to feel like it's getting further and further away, more so than qualifying totals would increase at. But that just comes to why people are in the sport. And again, I think as long as the level of these qualifying comps is a good standard, they will feel prestigious enough that people will be happy aiming to do them, aiming to place higher with them, and so forth. I don't think there's many inherently negative opinions that can't be kind of changed into a different perspective almost. It is a big change, and I understand why people are kind of freaking out a little bit over it. But firstly, there's still a lot of unanswered questions in terms of the extra remaining spots and things like that. I think a lot of people have kind of seen it and panicked without even realising that a lot of weight classes aren't even full at a national level yet. And I think that's also caused confusion as to why British Powerlifting decided to do this. A lot of people have said, why are they doing this with the open rather than the juniors, when the juniors are so overpopulated and junior nationals is already so oversubscribed? And that is true, but at the end of the day, juniors are up and coming in this sport. They are newer. You don't want to have to make them compete X amount of times a year to qualify for juniors. You're better off trialling this type of big change with the open pool of lifters. In my opinion, and a lot of people did agree with me when I said this, If it works really well, there is a good chance they'll bring it in for juniors. Because again, it will make the English more prestigious, the Welsh, Scottish, etc. Like, it will make all of these other competitions more prestigious, and they will have a similar feel to what British Nationals currently does. Because quite frankly, I know I'm not alone when I say this. As someone that has competed at British Nationals, every year that she's competed in the sport, it doesn't feel prestigious when you're there. It feels not like a slightly more busy regional, like for a lot of reasons. It's gonna make these comps level up, and British Powerlifting's vision is obviously to level up the game and make it more of a competitive sport, make you feel like an athlete in this sport, rather than just feeling like you're turning up to a meet with your friends and lifting heavy and seeing what you can do, which is also fine to do. It's just gonna add that extra tier to British powerlifting that I think we need to continue levelling up. For example, when the A totals and B totals got brought in a few years ago by Henry Tosh to qualify for Team GB, a lot of people had quite similar reactions to this, to be fair, and thinking they were never going to reach that. But actually what happened is the standard rose so much over the following couple of years. GB had so many lifters just kind of come out of nowhere. People progressed at a crazy rate because they had these numbers that were in front of them that they knew they had to hit if they want to achieve their goals. And I think this is just going to be a similar thing. This is going to push British powerlifting. It's going to push all of us to continue to push, to continue to work hard and not get comfortable in our position as well. It's going to make us all work harder to get our spots. So that is pretty much it. I feel like there weren't that many juicy opinions. One other point that I actually forgot to make was how it will affect the Team GB athletes, basically. So top athletes will be overworked and they'll have to push themselves at all levels to get on the team again. But I kind of had that thought to begin with, and then I was like, actually no, because British powerlifting have moved nationals to November, they have put it at a point in, like, they've done that on purpose so that the Team GB athletes who compete at Worlds or Euros have that time to prep for the British and re-qualify for the year after. It is going to be hard for people, but then it was always going to be. It's not like dispensation doesn't exist. I'm assuming dispensation will probably still apply, but that will need further clarification as well. But basically, if you're a Team GB lifter, as long as you do British in November and podium, you're guaranteed British for the year after. So you can just do your normal calendar for the year and then basically rinse and repeat. Podium at British every year and you'll be good. And if you're on Team GB, you'll probably come in first or second at the British anyway. So it hopefully won't mean they're overworked, but I guess that's something that will depend. But also, I think there's a lot more lifters now in that strength range of being able to make Team GB that it might mean that the team shuffles quite a lot more from year to year. But I guess we'll just have to wait and see on that. So that is pretty much everything. I've definitely missed some points, but that was the majority of them. Overall, I personally think it's a really positive change, and I actually think it's going to make me a lot more excited to prep for the British every year. It's definitely making me more excited to push for the podium this year. Like, I've wanted to podium anyway. That was always going to be the goal. And for me personally, my goals haven't changed. I'm still always going to push to be the strongest version of myself. And if the goalpost is put a bit higher, that's absolutely fine by me. But I think for the most part, everyone is seeing this as a pretty positive change. From, I say, selfish perspectives, they're not selfish at all, and I completely understand all of them. For those people who have been striving to qualify for the British and just feel like that goalpost has just been pushed like out of reach, I completely sympathise and I completely understand why this probably feels like a horrible decision for them. But at the same time, these other comps will be there. You can do these other comps, you can aim for these other comps, and hopefully they'll still give you that satisfaction because they will still be an achievement. And you can look to qualify, you don't have to just qualify for a national level to be successful in this sport. If you placed 10th at English last year, aim to place 8th next year, the 7th the year after, 5th the year after, things like that. Set yourself other little goalposts, or look at your total and just challenge your own total from comp to comp, because that's really what the sport is about. It's about getting stronger every time you step on the platform, within reason. Obviously that won't always be the case, but it's about progressing on your lifts, and eventually that will hopefully get you to a level that you are really proud of if you're not already proud of what you're doing. So to summarise, overall opinions have been pretty positive. The main consensus, which is kind of an obvious statement, is that it's going to help elevate the level of British powerlifting, which is what we should all want as members of British Powerlifting. Like, I want to see our athletes be as strong as possible, as competitive as possible on a world stage, and by pushing the level higher at a national level, it's going to then push us higher on an international level by default, you know. And I also think trickle-down effect, you know, if the British is going to be this prestigious of an event, and it's going to be more exclusive, then that is going to trickle down to these qualifying competitions as well. And that is something I'm really intrigued to see. I think it's overall a positive change, and as long as it's done properly, which by the sounds of things it will be, and I'm just going to go in with false confidence, as long as it's done well, I think this is a positive change. And again, I think the thing that people need to remember is currently weight classes still aren't full at the British. A lot of weight classes didn't have 14 lifters last year. That might change this year. The sport is growing rapidly. We might find that juniors want to come and compete in the Open if they can qualify for Open slots, which would also be really cool because it will push the juniors to like elevate their performances as well. But we'll just have to wait and see. There are still unknowns, but the qualifying procedure is pretty simple when you get your head around it. Essentially, you have to podium at the British or win at one of these qualifying comps, and then from there, if you don't make it in that by any of those routes, you just have to hit the highest totals to get the remaining spots. So basically, go to your comps, total as high as you can, and hope that it's enough to get into the British, is the summary of that. I'm gonna wrap the video up here though, so if you have made it this far, thank you for watching. If you have an opinion or thoughts that I haven't covered, please leave them down below and let me know. I'm really interested to hear everyone's opinions on this, or if I've missed something that's, like if I've made a mistake along the way, please do also let me know. If you have anything you want to talk about and you don't want to leave a comment, feel free to message me on Instagram. But yeah, I think it's a positive change. I'm trying to just stay positive with it. I'm excited to see kind of how British powerlifting elevates and continues to elevate, and how, when I say that, I mean the lifters, like, as well as the competition standards and things as well. But for me, I want to see how much the lifters continue to push and progress, and I think it's just an exciting time to be part of the sport and a member of the sport. And if you aren't going to be able to qualify for the British, but you know that it's going to be, you know, a lot of these amazing lifters coming together and competing against each other, volunteer. Go to these comps and volunteer, because it's still going to be an amazing opportunity and experience to do that as well. But yes, I'm sure I've missed people's points as well. Like, I have been talking to people all day, and I wanted to get this out kind of the same day the news came out, just to summarise for some people that I'm literally still getting messages through now where people are confused about the change. So hopefully this has cleared some of that up. Please let me know your thoughts. Please leave a like and subscribe if you haven't already, and I will continue posting my training as normal. I need to get my next video up tomorrow.